$5. The shout cut through the murmur of the crowd. I'll pay $5 for her. All eyes turned toward the tall figure at the edge of the gathering. The auctioneer's hammer paused midair as the crowd parted. A man with piercing blue eyes and the weathered face of a soldier stepped forward. A faded Union cavalry kerchief knotted at his throat. His right hand rested casually on the army Colt at his hip, thumb brushing the worn walnut grip that bore 3 notches, marks that told a story without words. The year was 1876, and Emily Richardson stood trembling on the auction block in Willow Creek, Kansas, her face burning with humiliation. 24 hours earlier, she'd stepped off the stagecoach full of hope, ready to meet Robert Morrison, her mail-order fiancé. But one look at her fuller figure, and he'd rejected her on the spot, leaving her stranded without a penny to her name. $10, the blue-eyed stranger called out firmly, his gaze never leaving Emily's face. $10 for the lady. The crowd fell silent. $10 was a week's wages for most men present. Sold! The auctioneer's gavel came down with a crack that made Emily flinch. To Jack Harrington of the Double H Ranch. Jack approached, removing his hat. Miss, I'm Jack Harrington. His voice was low, meant only for her. I'm offering you a position as housekeeper, nothing more. You'll have your own room with a lock on the door. Emily lifted her chin, summoning what dignity remained. Emily Richardson, Mr. Harrington, I accept your generous offer. As they rode away from town, Emily noticed the way Jack's eyes constantly scanned the horizon, the ingrained vigilance of a man who'd seen combat. The holstered Colt at his hip wasn't for show, and the Winchester rifle secured under the wagon seat looked well used. Gettysburg, Jack said suddenly, answering her unspoken question, and the Wilderness, served with the 7th Cavalry until '65. He didn't elaborate, but the shadows that crossed his face told Emily everything. I worked as a nurse's assistant during the war, she offered, in the field hospitals near Washington. Jack's head snapped toward her, genuine surprise in his eyes. Then you've seen more than most. Too much, Emily admitted softly. But it taught me useful skills. They crested a hill, and the Double H spread before them. A 2-story farmhouse, a freshly painted red barn, and various outbuildings arranged around a well-kept yard. Beyond stretched fenced pastures with cattle grazing against the endless Kansas sky. Built it from scratch after the war, Jack said, a hint of pride breaking through his reserved demeanor. Started with nothing but a land grant, my army pay, and these 2 hands. As they neared the house, Emily noticed a flash of movement to their left. Jack tensed immediately, hand dropping to his pistol. A moment later, a rider emerged from behind the barn, and Jack relaxed. Just Frank, he explained. My foreman. We served together. Frank approached their wagon, tipping his hat to Emily. So this is what all the fuss in town was about. His tone was respectful, but his eyes held questions. Miss Richardson is our new housekeeper, Jack said firmly. She worked in the field hospitals during the war. Frank's expression changed instantly. Ma'am. He nodded with newfound respect. Welcome to the Double H. 2 weeks later, Emily was in the kitchen kneading bread dough when a thunderous crash from the parlor made her jump. She rushed in to find Jack standing amid shattered glass, his face ashen, eyes fixed on something only he could see. Jack, she said softly, approaching carefully. Jack, you're at the Double H. You're safe. He didn't respond, his breathing ragged. Emily recognized the signs. She'd seen them countless times in the hospital tents. Lieutenant Harrington, she said more firmly, report. Jack's eyes snapped to her face. Emily? Confusion gave way to shame as awareness returned. The lamp. Sit down, she commanded, guiding him to a chair. She knelt before him, taking his trembling hands in hers. "Tell me what you saw." "Antietam Creek," he whispered. "All those boys in the water. The creek ran red." He stopped, shaking his head. "It's been happening more lately. Things trigger it. A sound, a smell." "The mind remembers what the heart wants to forget," Emily said. "My father was a doctor. He wrote about this in his journals. Soldiers coming home with wounds no one could see." Jack's eyes met hers, surprise replacing shame. "Most women would have run screaming by now." "I'm not most women, Lieutenant Harrington," Emily replied with a small smile. "Now let me clean this up, and then we'll have supper." As she swept up the broken glass, Emily felt Jack watching her. "You're right," he said quietly. "You're not most women at all." The drought hit in early July. Jack returned from checking the creek, his expression grim. "It's bad," he told Emily as they sat on the porch that evening. "Water's down by half already, and the heat's just beginning." Emily frowned. "May I see the creek tomorrow? I might have some ideas." The next morning they rode out together. Emily dismounted at the creek's edge, studying the trickle of water with a practiced eye. "Something's not right," she said, looking upstream. "This isn't just drought. The water's being diverted." Jack's brow furrowed. "How do you know?" "My neighbor in Boston was a botanist who studied watersheds. These plants," she pointed to certain weeds along the bank, "they only grow where water has recently receded. The pattern is wrong for natural drought." They followed the creek upstream until they reached the property line. There, hidden by a thicket of willows, they found it, an artificial dam that redirected most of the water westward. "Morrison," Jack growled, dismounting to examine the structure. "This is his land. He's stealing my water." "Why would he do that?" Emily asked. "The railroad," Jack replied tersely. "They're planning a depot somewhere in this area next year. Whoever gets it stands to make a fortune." He remounted his horse. "We're paying a visit to the sheriff." Sheriff Taylor was skeptical but agreed to investigate. "Water rights are serious business out here, Jack. If Morrison's diverting your creek, that's a hanging offense in some parts." As they left the sheriff's office, Emily spotted Robert Morrison across the street. Their eyes met, and his face contorted with rage. He strode toward them, flanked by two rough-looking men. "Harrington," he spat, "I see you're still keeping my reject." Before Jack could respond, Emily stepped forward. "Mr. Morrison," she said coolly, "I understand you've developed an interest in water management. Perhaps you could explain why Willow Creek now flows through your property instead of its natural course." Morrison's face paled. "I don't know what you're talking about." "The sheriff is riding out tomorrow to see for himself," Jack said. "Strange coincidence that the drought only affects my land, isn't it?" Morrison's hand drifted toward his coat, but Jack was faster. In one fluid motion, his Colt appeared, hammer cocked. "Don't," Jack said softly. The single word carried the weight of every battle he'd survived. Morrison slowly raised his hands. "This isn't over, Harrington." "It is for today," Jack replied. "Now back off before I decide Kansas needs one less water thief." As Morrison retreated, Emily released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "That was close." "Too close," Jack agreed, holstering his weapon. "We need to be ready. Morrison won't take this lying down." They were awakened before dawn by Frank pounding on the door. "Fire!" he shouted. "North pasture's burning." Jack was on his feet instantly, pulling on his boots. "Get the men in the water wagon," he ordered. "Emily, stay here." "I will not," she retorted, already dressing. "You need every hand." For hours they battled the blaze alongside the ranch hands and neighboring farmers who'd seen the smoke. By mid-morning, they'd contained it, but not before it had consumed 50 acres of precious grazing land. "Could have been lightning," Frank suggested as they surveyed the damage. Jack shook his head. There wasn't a cloud in the sky. This was Morrison. That afternoon, Samuel Thornton, the former school teacher who helped with the ranch accounts, arrived with unexpected news. "I found something," he announced, spreading papers on the kitchen table. "Railroad surveys from 2 years ago. Look at the creek's original path." Jack studied the maps. "It cuts right through my northwest corner." "Exactly," Samuel nodded. "And here's the best part. Correspondence between Morrison and the railroad company. He mentions adjusting the local watershed to make his land more attractive for development." "He admitted to diverting the creek?" Emily asked incredulously. "In writing," Samuel confirmed with a smile. "But there's more. The railroad rejected his proposal last month due to concerns about flooding risks from his adjustments." Jack looked up sharply. "So all this, the drought, the fire, it was for nothing?" "Morrison may not know yet," Samuel cautioned. Jack's jaw tightened. "Then it's time he found out." The confrontation came sooner than expected. As Sheriff Taylor and his deputies were dismantling Morrison's dam the next day, shots rang out from the ridgeline above. "Take cover!" Jack shouted, pulling Emily behind a boulder as bullets kicked up dirt around them. "Morrison, you damn fool!" the sheriff bellowed. "You're firing on a peace officer. That's a hanging offense." More shots answered him. Jack caught Frank's eye and signaled toward the ridge. Frank nodded, understanding the plan without words. "Flank the shooters while the sheriff kept them occupied." "Stay here," Jack ordered Emily. "I mean it this time." As Jack slipped away, Emily noticed movement to her right. One of Morrison's men was working his way down to get a better angle on the sheriff. Without hesitation, she grabbed a fallen deputy's rifle. "Sheriff, on your right!" she called out, raising the weapon. The man whirled toward her, firing wildly. Emily squeezed the trigger, and the rifle bucked against her shoulder. Her shot went wide, but it was enough to make him duck for cover. Suddenly, there was a cry of pain from the ridge. Emily's heart stopped. She knew that voice. "Jack!" Ignoring the danger, she ran toward the sound, keeping low. She found him behind an outcropping, blood seeping through his fingers where he clutched his left arm. "Just a graze," he grimaced. "What are you doing here? I told you to stay put." "I'm a terrible listener," Emily retorted, tearing a strip from her petticoat to bind his wound. "Now hold still." Above them, the shooting had stopped. They heard shouting, then the sheriff's voice calling the all clear. When they emerged, they found Morrison being held at gunpoint, his face bloodied. "Tried to run," Sheriff Taylor explained. "Took a bad fall down the hillside instead." Morrison glared at Jack with undisguised hatred. "This isn't over, Harrington." Jack met his gaze steadily. "You fired on a peace officer and tried to steal my water. I'd say it's about as over as it gets." Morrison's trial was swift and decisive. Evidence of water theft, coupled with the attack on the sheriff's party, earned him 5 years in the territorial prison. The creek was restored to its natural course, and with the autumn rains, the Double H began to recover from the drought. On a crisp October evening, Jack asked Emily to ride with him to his favorite spot on the ranch, a small rise overlooking the now flowing creek, where cottonwood trees blazed golden against the sunset. "My father proposed to my mother right here," Jack said as they spread a blanket on the ground. "Said he wanted to give her the prettiest view on the ranch along with his heart." Emily's pulse quickened. "Is that why we're here?" Jack reached into his pocket and withdrew a small wooden box. Inside was a hand-carved ring, the band polished smooth and etched with an intricate pattern of vines and flowers. "I'm not good with words, Emily," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "But when you stood on that auction block, something in me knew. And every day since, the way you handled my episodes, how you fought for the ranch, stood up to Morrison, you've proven what I suspected all along." "And what's that?" Emily asked softly. "That you're the strongest, bravest woman I've ever known." Jack took her hand. "Emily Richardson, I'm asking you to be my wife, not my housekeeper, but my partner in everything. To build a life on this land that I love almost as much as I love you. Tears blurred Emily's vision as she nodded. Yes, she whispered. Yes, Jack Harrington. Jack slid the wooden ring onto her finger, then pulled her into his arms for a kiss that held all the promise of their future together. 5 years later, the Double H was thriving. Jack stood on the porch, watching Emily teaching their 4-year-old daughter Lily how to recognize healing plants in the kitchen garden. Their 2-year-old son James tottered after them, clutching a wooden horse Jack had carved for him. Frank rode up, dismounting with a nod of greeting. Just got word from town. Morrison's being released next week. Jack's expression hardened. You think he'll cause trouble? Man spent 5 years thinking about revenge, Frank replied. I'd bet on it. That evening, after the children were asleep, Jack told Emily about Morrison's impending release. We'll face it together, she said, taking his hand. Like we faced everything else. Jack studied her face, still beautiful, now with laugh lines at the corners of her eyes. You know, when I bid on you that day, I never imagined that a generously proportioned mail-order bride reject would become your greatest ally? Emily finished with a smile. Jack laughed, pulling her close. That I'd find the courage I lost at Antietam in a woman who wasn't afraid of my demons. And I never thought I'd find a home with a man who saw past my size to the person inside, Emily said softly. Jack kissed her, still marveling at how perfectly they fit together. Let Morrison come, he murmured against her lips. We've weathered worse storms. Outside, a prairie thunderstorm rolled in, lightning illuminating the vast Kansas sky. But inside the home they'd built together, Jack and Emily Harrington knew they were exactly where they belonged, with each other. Best $10 I ever spent, Jack whispered, making Emily laugh. You're impossible, she said, shaking her head. Impossibly lucky, he corrected, sealing the truth with a kiss. And that, folks, is how 2 wounded souls found healing on the Kansas frontier. If you enjoyed this tale of courage, judgment, and redemption, hit that subscribe button. I'm curious, have you ever stood up against the odds like Jack and Emily? Or found strength in someone others underestimated? Share your stories in the comments below. Until next time, this is Frontier Tales, where the true spirit of America lives on.